This is Afsaneh Beschloss, CEO of the Rock Creek Group. After a deeply polarizing election campaign, the United States has voted to make Donald Trump its 45th president. This is a win by the most anti-establishment candidate either party has nominated since George Wallace ran in 1968. Tuesday's election results also handed control of the legislative branch to the Republican Party. The initial market reaction, which was negative as the S&P future hit their lower limit trigger of 5% in the aftermarket trading on Tuesday night, recovered. The Dow Jones Industrial Average also continues to lead. Amid this surge in uncertainty and volatility, investors are trying to assess how they should be positioned. Do you believe President-elect Trump an ideologue or mainly a deal-maker with few fixed principles?
Now, I think the best way to portray Trump is basically as an actor. Right now, he would be delighted if all of the history of the campaigns and everything else related to content and the like were just washed out, and he is sitting tabula rasa in the White House. If Trump wants to have completely tabula rasa and start from scratch on any particular sets of positions, you have to ask yourself not, is he going to go in that direction? I think he's already indicated that. The question is, how far can he go? Because there are obviously constraints, largely from the people who have basically supported him.
On trade, so one of the issues is that the president has quite extraordinary power in trade. They can be very activist with the existing trade authority in the United States. They can pursue dumping and 301 cases and be much more active in sort of retaliation or conceived of retaliation to unfair trading practices abroad. They could do something on, they could call for the first time China a currency manipulator and do something about it. So I do want to say in the area of trade policy in particular, I think we have to note that he has a fair amount of executive authority.
He will never veto a bill coming out of both the House and the Senate. In other words, he'll never put himself in a position where he is against the Republican Party in general. But just remember, he is a performer. This is a new act for him. It's a new script. I do agree that the executive orders are going to be taken down. I do agree that Obamacare, of course, is going to be dropped, and it's going to be very difficult to get a consensus within the Republican Party on what the substitute is going to be. Most interesting issues, which we haven't discussed at all, is the military.
Yes.
The military is very seriously underfunded. The current budget projections for 4 or 5 years out are at the lowest level as a percent of GDP since 1940. If the continued level of force that we're pushing on at the moment is maintained, that budget has got to go up, and clearly there's a very serious problem here, which I don't think has really been addressed at all.
Liaquat, bond markets got really worried and spooked, maybe because of potential inflation. I think they started thinking about some of the things you're talking about. So can you talk to that and sort of connect it to what we're talking about on infrastructure, military entitlements?
Okay, so if we look at what financial markets have done over the past 2 days,
yes.
Essentially interest rates have risen by 20, 30 basis points in the long end. Inflationary expectations have risen. The stock market has gone up, although there's been a massive sort of shift in the composition. So yes. Tech has gone down, the areas that he's going to deregulate have gone down, and emerging markets have gone down. So the inference, the inference from all of this is that he's going to be, if you like, the early days of Reagan. Expansionary fiscal policy. The Fed is going to, and interest rates are going to go up. What I don't think, and what I think we need to incorporate into this is that he is a populist. He's not a traditional Republican. And, for all his talk of deregulation, he was elected by people who are not business leaders. The business leaders actually completely disavowed him, as did, foreign policy leaders and the whole elite. And he has to do something for the mass of people who voted him in. And that populism, I don't know what form it takes, but we may not be assigning enough significance to that populist streak.
So do you think that the part of the populist streak, though, might be to be more active where he can be on trade? So he as I said, he does have a lot of authority there. So one populist thing is to have a massive infrastructure spend, and I think he can probably get that through. But that's not. But the other thing, which would be anti, is basically anti-trade, using his executive authority. And, a trade prosecutor and a couple high-profile cases and slashing some tariffs on imports of Chinese, steel and, doing some high things using his actor flourishes, which I think Alan is good to remind us about. And then on immigration, since during the campaign he moved away from deporting the 11 million. But, of course, if he undoes President Obama's executive order, all of those 11 million illegal aliens are at risk. But he's moved to getting rid of criminals, and so the question is, could he do something high-profile early on immigration and trade?
I would generalize it. I would say in the sense that he is apt to do things which make a big splash but have no real significance.
How is President-elect Trump likely to reshape the Fed?
It depends on how much, from the existing open market committee, the answer, of course, is no. And the question is how much there's erosion in it. Two places are a problem, but not definitive. If you get a number of more, you'll get very much to what Volcker had in his last year in office, where he in fact was voted down for the first time before or since.
I worry about the sort of people he surrounds himself with on economic policy. I don't think they have a coherent. Trump's around. His group of economic advisors. I think put less weight on Fed independence than they should, so I would think that there will be an erosion in the degree of Fed independence over time through new appointments, and I think we're seeing this. We've seen this in the rhetoric against the Bank of England and Mark Carney. And we're going to see this throughout the world, that the sort of people who are taking power don't believe in institutions.
I'm a little more worried than any of you about legal changes in the structure with respect to the Fed. The point that I think is critical is that there was more rhetoric about changes in the legal aspects of the Federal Reserve, the structure, than actually happened. All of those who've been watching this are surprised that the Fed got through 2008 with so little alteration. And I'm fearful that legislation will actually make it through the Congress. And if that's the case, Trump will surely sign it.
What do we think his main targets will be on the regulatory front? Especially with Dodd-Frank, do you think that it will be the end of Dodd-Frank?
Yeah. For all intents and purposes, there'll be the FSOC will go, the financial, consumer protection,
financial protection. That's
right.
The one. Yeah,
that will go. I think the whole regulatory apparatus of sort of overseeing the potential, the interagency group that is supposed to monitor financial stability, I think will probably be weakened considerably. I think the fiduciary rule will disappear. The Department of Labor fiduciary rule. So I think they will dismantle most of it, and I hope they don't dismantle the capital adequacy.
That this is the first time where we have enough votes to get rid of Dodd-Frank, get rid of a goodly part of regulation. It's going to be actually the area where it's easiest to do things, because the regulation is clearly not working. It's causing a decrease in liquidity in the financial system. I mean, all of the things that Dodd-Frank was supposed to accomplish failed.
Right.
But nobody wants to make that statement.
So that goes back to corporate tax reform, because many multinational companies have said over and over again, and I've worked on this, and I've been a proponent of the idea of reducing the rate in the United States, but many of the companies have said that a change in the rate environment in the United States, plus moving to a kind of hybrid territorial system, would lead them to bring stuff back, both the money they have abroad, but also some of the operations they have abroad. So one thing that I think that's going to become, the corporate tax reform, I think, is going to be a central issue relatively early on.
There's been a lot of tough talk from Mr. Trump more broadly on foreign policy, Alan. During the campaign, he questioned the value of alliances such as NATO and praised Vladimir Putin. What can we expect from Mr. Trump on the foreign policy front? And what is your view in terms of perceptions of American power and influence likely to change among foreign leadership?
Even when I was in government, everyone basically looked to the United States for leadership in all of the financial institutions. And that was a general view, and we, whether we liked it or not, were the world's policemen.
Right.
And the system was stable. But now everyone is losing respect for the United States and are going on their own. And they're doing all sorts of things which they wouldn't have dared to do in the face of American negative reaction. So I think the United States has come down a long way. Our posture is shrinking relative to China, which is really the major issue. Russia is a problem, but they're not growing like China is. So I think that our foreign policy requires very significant revamping. It's not working, and it's working to our detriment, if anything.